Good morning. My name is Jim Nolan. I'm a professor of sociology here at West Virginia University. And one of my research areas is hate crime. And I'm going to do a short presentation today on the topic of hate crime and hate crime prevention. It may be helpful in your deliberations. So in this presentation, I want to make 3 points. The first is that hate crimes appear to be on the rise since 2014. Also, it appears that hate crimes are affected by fear-mongering that's become endemic in our political discourse. An actual fear triggered by things like terrorist attacks. Also, hate crime offenders appear to have changed, and I want to share with you some reason why I think this is important. And finally, I want to talk to you about a research project that's currently underway here at West Virginia University, which may shed some light on the community conditions that may prevent hate crimes. So let's get started. Since the early 1990s, the FBI has collected hate crimes from local law enforcement. They compile annual statistics and publish them. And you can see here is a line from 1992 to 2017 that shows the number of hate crimes varies a little bit. From a low from 1994, 6,000 hate crimes, and a high, nearly 10,000 hate crimes in 2001. The trend line goes to, it's a slight decrease until 2014, and then it begins to shift. And it's slowly going, it appears to be slowly increasing, and the preliminary findings from 2018 shows that trend is likely to continue. Now, what's really important, I think, from the data collection from the FBI is you can put together monthly numbers, and here you can see in this chart, it comes from the Center for Hate and Extremism at Cal State San Bernardino. Brian Levin is the director there, and he put together this chart, and it shows in 1992 the high month is when the riots, the Los Angeles riots, erupted after the Rodney King verdict, and then you see in 1996 or 1995 after the O.J. Simpson verdict, another spike in hate crimes, and then of course after September 11th, there were a spike in hate crime, almost 2,000 in a month, in September of 2001. And then the presidential election of 2016 was also a high month, and one of the highest months since hate crime data collection began. That's the first thing I want to show you, that hate crimes appear to be up, and also that they can tell us something about the events that predict high numbers of hate crimes. The next thing I want to talk about is the changing nature of hate crime offenders in the United States, and why I think this is important. In the early 1990s, colleagues and friends of mine, Jack Levin and Jack McDevitt at Northeastern University, wrote a book about hate crimes, and in it they talked about a study they conducted at the Boston Police Department by looking at the records of hate crimes. And he found that the vast majority of hate crimes were committed by what they called thrill seekers. Thrill seekers are young, teens, impressionable. These are people who are likely bored, looking for fun at someone else's expense. They often go outside their own community, like to a gay bar or a synagogue, or to a minority neighborhood, again for kicks, to harass or to insult or to destroy property. And these offenders, according to Levin and McDevitt, were not likely to be hardcore bigots, but they were going along just for the psychological thrill of it. And again, these were the vast majority of hate crime offenders. The second type of offender was the defensive offender. And these are people that are usually older, and they're reacting to what appears to be an intrusion or a change in the way of life. There's some triggering event that evokes an expression of anger. It's a perceived threat or a way of life. The offender tends to commit hate crimes in a place where he or she works, where the mission offender would go to outside the neighborhood. The defensive offender was defending his or her turf. And they found that these defensive offenders tended to work alone and often wouldn't stop until the threat was removed. The third type of offender was the mission offender. And the mission offender is the rarest kind, according to their research. And these were older offenders who usually acted alone, seeking to rid the world of evil. And evil, the other that was under attack was the personification of evil. These offenders also usually sought out multiple victims. And some examples, Timothy McVeigh, the Oklahoma City bombing, Dylan Roof from Charleston, South Carolina, was trying to start a race war. And Omar Mateen, who killed 49 people at a gay club in Orlando, Florida in 2016. These are mission offenders. In a recent study that we conducted here at West Virginia University, we looked at 3 time periods. January 1992 to September 10th, 2001 as time 1. Time 2, September 11th, 2001 to December of 2007. And time 3, January 1st, 2008 to December 31st, 2016. Now we compared a couple characteristics. Now as I mentioned, the offenders, thrill-seeking offenders were younger, they worked in groups, but the defensive and mission offenders were more likely to be over 40 years old, working alone rather than in a group. Offender lived in the jurisdiction, and the victim lived in the jurisdiction where the hate crime occurred, and there were mission offenders, there were multiple offenders. So if you look at compared to time 1 before September 11th, after September 11th, the odds go up. 20% higher that they're over 40, 10% higher working alone, 30% higher odds that the offender lived in the jurisdiction where the crime occurred, almost 50% higher that the victim also lived in the jurisdiction where it occurred, and again, the multiple offenders, the mission offenders, 10% higher odds. And this continues to go up. So it's not just right after September 11th this happened, it's continuing. So look at time period 2, after 2008, you see 66% higher odds that they're over 40, 19% higher odds that they're working alone, 52% odds that the offender lives in the jurisdiction, 48% higher odd that the victim does, and 18% higher odds that there's multiple victims. And this is also what I want to note here is that we also have 31% higher odds. This is rural jurisdictions, so this is more likely to happen in rural jurisdictions than in urban. So what I note here is that the defensive and the mission offenders are arguably more dangerous than the thrill-seeking offenders. And they're motivated by, although all hate crimes are motivated by bias, they're motivated to act because of fear and anger. There's 2 other types, Jack Levin writes about this, there's 2 other types of people that make hate crimes possible. And these are sympathizers and spectators. Sympathizers are people who wouldn't commit hate crimes themselves, but what they do is they hold the same beliefs as those who are committing the hate crimes. That these people are somewhat deserving of what they get. And then spectators are people who don't agree, are not bigoted, but they don't know how to act. They don't know how to step in and intervene to prevent. So they fail to stand up in opposition of what they see as hate. And these are the vast majority of people, not the hate offenders, but the people who permit hate crimes to actually occur. The last thing I want to talk about is research that's we're currently doing here at West Virginia University. And we use the term community dynamics to refer to the types of relationships that exist in the community. And we have these measures of community dynamics that we wondered about what is the impact of these on hate crimes. So what we mean by dynamics, these are what we call psychodynamic processes, and it relates to relationships between and among residents and relationships between and among residents and public officials, like the police. Now there's three dynamic conditions that we're going to refer here. One is called interdependence, and the other is conflict or frustration, and the third one is dependence. Now, interdependence refers to the residents, the extent to which the residents watch out for each other, they trust each other, they know each other to wave to or say hello to, and they rely on each other, basically. The conflict frustration there's an expectation among the residents that their neighbors will say hello, respond back, be trustworthy. And when that doesn't happen, they get frustrated, or they just, keep their distance. And then the third level is dependence, and this is communities where the residents basically live in isolation from each other, or they don't know each other very well, and they just figure that if something happens, we're just going to notify the police. The reason we call this dynamics because in each community there's different levels of interdependence and conflict and dependence. So like in this example here, interdependence, there's high levels of interdependence, low levels of conflict and dependence, where you see there's different levels in these other sample communities. And just to give you an idea of how we measure interdependence, we ask questions like, generally speaking, the residents in this community trust each other, rely heavily on each other. These are measures of interdependence. Measures of conflict are to what extent the residents in this community, we don't get along with each other, we don't work together well on community problems. We're frustrated with the police. These are measures of conflict. And measures of dependence, we call the police for most community problems. We trust the police to be highly effective crime fighters. We have confidence that the police are capable of preventing crime alone. So these are measures that we use to measure these community dynamics. Now we also asked questions about hate crime. So we asked the question, were you threatened or assaulted in the last 12 months because of your race, religion, ethnicity, or group membership? Are you seriously worried about being attacked because of your skin color, ethnicity, or religion? Or are you seriously worried about being attacked by strangers? So these are the things that we're measuring that are related to hate crimes. And what we found in a sample, a probability sample in West Virginia, we found that in these types of places where there's high levels of interdependence, there's less than 1% chance that a hate crime occurred in the past 12 months. And again, this is not hypothetical. This is based on actual reports, self-reports of these crimes. There's a less than 1% chance of being fearful of a bias assault, and less than 1% chance of fearing strangers. Compare that with a community that's high levels of conflict. 36% chance of having a hate crime occur in the past 12 months, 75% chance of being fearful of a bias assault, and 39% chance of fearing strangers. And then in the dependent community, and again, there's lots of effort sometimes on the part of the police and the elected officials to be dependent, to force sort of dependence. Trust us, we can protect you, that type of thinking. But if you look at it, there's a low chance of hate crimes occurring, 5% chance, 14% chance of fearing a bias assault, but 37% chance of fearing strangers. So obviously, clearly this interdependent community is worthwhile striving for in terms of hate crime prevention efforts. So in summary, I want to make a few points. Hate crimes appear to be on the rise since 2014, and they're likely to be driven by fear. Since 9/11, hate crimes offenders appear more likely to be defensive and mission-oriented rather than thrill-seeking, which makes them arguably more dangerous. Sympathizers and spectators create conditions for hate to exist, whether they or we recognize it or not. Community dynamics matter. Creating interdependent places can prevent hate crimes and can be the focus of action. these conditions must be deliberately sought. How this works is this: if in a community, any issue can be the issue that brings people together to build the types of relationship that can prevent crime, prevent hate crime, prevent fear of crime. I'm sorry I couldn't be with you today, but I'm available. If you want to contact me, I'm at jim.nolan@mail.wvu.edu.